morning, thank you for joining me. Welcome to another Friday chat video. Today's Friday chat, we are talking podcasts. I spent a lot of January trying to find some podcasts to listen to. I like a podcast, but I felt like I didn't quite know. I hadn't really drilled down into what were my favourites, and I didn't have any regular ones anymore. I used to have one that was quite regular that I really enjoyed. I tend to only listen to podcasts in the car, but I decided to spend January listening to lots of different ones, finding some to recommend, finding some not to recommend, and I think I have a total of, bear with, 21 that I listened to. And some really good ones in there, some not so good ones, and I'm just going to talk to you about all of them. I asked on Instagram at the beginning of the year for your recommendations, so some of these were recommendations from you, some were some that I sort of found on my travels around the internet, and some were ones that I'd heard about that I wanted to look into, and yeah, I found them in various different ways. It was quite an interesting experiment. I definitely have discovered that I generally am not a fan of podcasts that are basically celebrities interviewing other celebrities. Those are not my favourite genre, and there are an awful lot of those out there. Some are better than others, obviously, but yeah, I discovered that those are not really my favourite ones. I tend to prefer ones where it's the same people every week, so the same host or hosts. Feel like you get more of a connection with those people that way, and that's what I really like, rather than different people being interviewed. But let's start anyway, and I'm going to go through them in the order that I listened to them. I made a lot of notes because a lot of this was back at the beginning of January, and frankly I don't remember that far back anymore, so let's begin. The first one was At Your Leisure with Sue Perkins. I saw this advertised on a tube train, bizarrely, when we went up to London in October. I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. And Sue Perkins, as you know, is half of Mel and Sue, is it? Do you know, I was wanting to say Mel and Kim then. That dates me, doesn't it? Who remembers Mel and Kim from the 80s? Yeah, Mel and Sue was sort of comedy duo, TV presenter slash. I think she used to present. They used to present the British Bake Off, didn't they? They've been on various things, but anyway, Sue Perkins now has this podcast called At Your Leisure, and the basic premise of it is that she interviews celebrities about how they spend their leisure time and hobbies and things. A lot of it was sort of going back to their childhood, which I didn't find massively interesting, but when I was quite interested to hear about how they spend their leisure time now. I listened to 2 episodes of this. One was Nadia Hussain, who won the Bake Off, and the other one was Giovanna Fletcher, who is she an author or something? I think she writes books, and she was also on I'm a Celebrity. I feel like was she a blogger? Possibly. I don't know. Anyway, I know who she is, but I quite enjoyed it. But it was very much that it was less about the hobbies and more celebrity to celebrity chit chat thing, which, as I said, is not my favourite genre. So I think that probably isn't one that I would go back to. But if the interview is with someone you're really interested in, definitely worth a listen, that one. Second one I listened to, number 2, was The Wittering Whitehalls. Now, if you have watched Jack Whitehall's Netflix series, there's several series of it now, I think Travels with My Father. Oh, it's one of the funniest things. His sense of humour is just so dry. And Michael Whitehall, absolutely love him. Elderly chap, and this podcast is him and his wife, who are an elderly couple, I would say, in their 70s at least. Possibly older. Michael and Hilary are their names, and it's just them chatting, and they are both intelligent and witty. Their sense of humour really appeals to me. The episodes are about 40 minutes long. One thing I found with the podcast that I listened to, I was looking for something maybe up to half an hour, 40 minutes generally, but the shorter the better for me. I like a short, and a lot of these were an hour and a half, 2 hours, and that for me is a big time investment, so that would tend to put me off a little bit. But the Whitehorse, sorry, back to the Whitehorse, yeah, they talk about all sorts of subjects. They were talking about Christmas food in the recipes and things, and just general chit-chat and funny day-to-day. Very entertaining. I really liked it, and that is definitely one that I will continue to follow. They seem to have a lot of episodes coming out, at least one a week, sometimes more. The third podcast I listened to was called Optimal Health Daily. I really liked the sound of this. It was 10-minute bite-sized daily episodes on all sorts of different subjects related to health. The one I listened to was easy exercises to lower your blood pressure. I didn't enjoy it. It was American, and I say this with absolutely no detriment whatsoever to anything or anybody American, but I think the way we approach health, and certainly healthcare, without wanting to get into massive debates here, are so different between the UK and America, and it didn't feel... It didn't feel like I could relate to it. I loved the idea of a really short daily episode on a different subject to do with health, but it just didn't gel with me at all. I feel like, now I could be wrong about this, but I seem to remember that it was somebody reading an article out rather than talking in a... It felt very dry. And the content of the actual episode I listened to was kind of difficult to relate to. I would love there to be sorry, there's a flashing ambulance light down there. Distracted me for a minute. I would like there to be a UK version of this, but not reading out an article. I'd like it to be someone chatting. And I loved the idea of it being a 10-minute episode, and that was very appealing to me. But this one just wasn't for me. The next one I listened to was Jenny Eclair's podcast. Jenny Eclair and Judith Holder. I don't know who Judith Holder is, but I like her. And it's called Older and Wider. This was one recommended by my Instagram readers or viewers, or whatever you call Instagram people. Followers, I guess, don't you? Bear with, I need to answer that. Sorry about that, that was Will on the phone, so I just had a little chat with him. He's at Paddington Station waiting for a train, and it's a train strike again. These train strikes are getting very tedious, aren't they? Anyway, I suppose that's the idea of striking, isn't it? To make it tedious for people. Unfortunately, inconveniencing the people who have no power over whether they get a pay rise or a change of conditions or whatever it is they want is really only inconveniencing the general public, isn't it, rather than anyone else. People are getting very sick of it. Anyway, that's my political statement for the day. Should we get back to the podcast? Yeah, Older and Wider with Jenny Eclair and Judith Holder. They are ladies of a certain age. If you know Jenny Eclair, she's, I think, a comedian, author, I'm wanting to say actress maybe. I feel like she was in some TV comedy type thing, but I could be completely wrong about that. I know I've read a couple of her books and not particularly enjoyed them, but I really liked the juxtaposition of the two characters. There's quite a bit, it's quite sweary, this one, just to warn you. Episodes are around 45 minutes, so not over long. Lots of talk about their grandchildren, so if that's not your bag, that might be a bit tedious, but I really enjoyed this. This is another one that I will continue to follow. I probably won't listen to every episode, but I'll certainly dip in and out of it. Just general life chit chat about being older, and I think they're maybe in their 60s, and yeah, chit chat about life, the universe and everything. Entertaining, enjoyed it. The next one is one on a similar vein. Kay Adams, who I know from Loose Women on the TV at lunchtime, has a podcast called How to Be 60. So another one of a lady of a certain age talking about life in your 60s type of thing. She's recently been 60, I think. And she talks, the co-host on that is her friend Karen, I don't know her surname. And they also have weekly guests, but there's quite a lot of them talking, just the two of them. They seem to have the right balance between celebrities interviewing celebrities and chit chat with just the two of them, which I liked. Again, this is one that I will continue to watch and would recommend. The next one I listened to was Off Menu with Ed Gamble and James Acaster. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There are many series of this. If you're somebody who wants something that has a lot of episodes and you like a long binge listen, this is one that would certainly tick that box. It is a food podcast, which on the surface would be absolutely up my street. Love a bit of food, me, and food chat and food TV programmes. I didn't love this. I wanted to love it and I didn't. The episode I listened to had Stanley Tucci as the celebrity guest. Every episode has a celebrity guest and it's loosely based around, they chit chat and they're in a dream restaurant. They have their favourite drink, starter, main course and dessert, and the chat is sort of very loosely based around that. It was quite a long episode. Every episode I think is quite long. In my opinion, it needed editing. I found it quite lengthy and not that a big fan of Stanley Tucci. I really like him on the television and, you know, acting and his foodie programs, but one of the presenters as well, I don't know which one it was, slightly irritated me. I didn't hugely warm to him, and yeah, I felt like it needed editing. I felt like it was a bit too rambly and long-winded, so that probably isn't one that I'd go back to again. Next one, number 7, was completely different. It was called Clean With Me. It was the beginning of the year and I was wanting to start on my decluttering and my cleaning and my all of that stuff, and I wanted some inspiration, and so I picked Clean With Me, which is presented by two hosts, Jessica and Rani, I think it is. Each of them presents different episodes, so they don't tend to do it together. It's chit chat about cleaning and organising and decluttering. Really right up my street. I love YouTube, that sort of thing on YouTube, but this wasn't for me. I found myself tuning out. I listened to one episode of each of them and I just found it, I tuned out a lot. I found myself not being able to concentrate on it because it was just not interesting me very much. So yeah, the episodes are about 30 minutes in that one, but I didn't enjoy that one. That's not one I'd go back to again. The next one is a very, very popular one, Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett from Dragon's Den. This is sort of long form interviews, 1.5 hours long. I put this one off and off and off because it was so long. I felt like, I don't know, it just felt like a big time commitment to start this one. But I did eventually get round to it, and the episode I listened to was Davina McCall's interview. It was excellent. I don't know if it was just because it was his interview with Davina McCall. I think everyone is an interview. He's got some really interesting ones in the back catalogue. This isn't something that I'd listen to every episode simply because it's so long. It is such a time commitment. But it would be excellent for a long journey. I think probably I would look through the back catalogue when I've got a long journey coming up, going up to my mum's or something, and find someone I was interested in, and certainly download an episode or two for a long journey. I think that it was good quality listening. I would say he interviews very well, and Davina is very interesting as well. She talked a lot about her life, and yeah, enjoyed it, but it would be a dip in and out occasionally for me because of the length of time of those. The next one was one that I went back to. I talked about earlier, Optimal Health Daily. The next one was Optimal Living Daily. This is, again, it was 10-minute daily episodes. This is based around mental health. But again, it was reading from an article which I didn't gel with, I didn't connect to, I didn't get that sort of human connection. It felt very dry. Yeah, I just didn't connect very much with the content. I think possibly a UK version again, I might have found easier to connect to on this. Number 10 was The Newsagents, and I very much enjoyed this. It's a daily during the week. I think it's every day news or current affairs podcast, I guess. It's hosted by Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall, who are apparently 3 of the UK's top journalists, and it's a daily news podcast. And the blurb says they're not just here to tell you what's happening, but why. Now, the podcasts, the daily episodes are between 15 minutes and 30 minutes long. Not in the least sensationalist. I love that about it. It was intelligent commentary on what's going on, digging a little bit deeper. The first episode I listened to talked a little bit about US politics, which I know really not very much about at all, but in a really accessible way. I came away from that 20-minute episode feeling like I'd really learned something. I like the way they're not sensationalist about the news. I like the way it feels quite intelligent and not the normal media scaremongering nonsense. This is something that I've subscribed to and will be listening to regularly. Next one I listened to was Stompcast with Dr. Alex George. He was originally a Love Island contestant, and then apparently I've lost the ability to speak. He was originally a Love Island contestant in the one and only series of Love Island I ever watched. He was like a fish out of water, really. And then reinvented himself as a TV doctor, and I think he's still a hospital doctor as well. Basically, the premise of this, it's again celebrity interviews other celebrities type of thing, but he goes for a walk in London, somewhere in London, and interviews a celebrity or interviews them. I quite liked this because even the longer interviews were still broken down into 30-minute episodes. For some reason, I just like the idea of these shorter episodes. It feels so much more accessible to me. The one I listened to, he was interviewing Ella, whose surname I've forgotten, who started the brand Deliciously Ella. I've got a couple of her cookbooks, and she has a range of baby food. She's had quite an interesting background. I knew a little bit about her beforehand, but I like Dr. Alex George, and I would listen to more of these. I think it's something that I dip in and out of occasionally. Number 12 was Binge Watch. I wanted to find a podcast about what was on TV, and this was the one I came across and listened to. It's by 2 journalists, Hannah Fernando and Ian McEwan, and it's basically they're rounding up the new releases on TV, what is on TV that week. They talk about terrestrial TV and the streaming platforms. It's about 20 minutes an episode, and I listened to a couple of these, and I found something heard about something on Netflix that I wouldn't have known about otherwise, which I went on to enjoy after that. So yes, this is one that I think I have subscribed to it, and I will follow it fairly regularly. I always think it's very difficult. You get a deluge of information about what's on TV, but it's nice to hear a little bit more about what something's about rather than just watching it. To hear about what something's about and people's opinion of it is quite nice in order to decide whether to watch it. The next one is another celebrity interviews other celebrities, but it was a good one, this one. It's Katie Piper, she's on Loose Women and also a TV presenter, and I've seen her speak live as well. She suffered an acid attack and had dreadful facial injuries from that, and she's written a book about that and her subsequent life since then. In fact, I think she's written 2 books now, but she is called Katie Piper's Extraordinary People, and she does interviews with really fascinating people. I've listened to a couple of episodes of this. I don't know if this one's finished now, but there's quite a back catalogue. I don't think she's done any new ones for about a year, but there's one with a guest called Lucy Edwards, who is a blind lady. She lost her sight at 17, so, terrible. Not losing your sight or any of your senses is just awful, but I think losing your sight at such an age is just unbelievable. It was such an interesting interview and gave me a lot of food for thought and things you haven't realised before, and she spoke very eloquently, and yeah, it was really good, and I would go back and listen to more of those. Number 14 was another celebrity interviews other celebrities. See what I mean about how many podcasts there are with this going on. And this was Kate Thornton, who's a TV presenter who I like. It's called White Wine Question Time. This is another one that has loads of back catalogue. I think there's something like 200, over 200 episodes of this one. Sorry, I've got an itchy nose. Over 200 episodes of this one. And this is sort of loosely based, White Wine Question Time, it's loosely based around the idea that there's 3 questions over the course of 3 glasses of wine. I listened to her interview with Ralph Little. Most episodes are over an hour of this one. She's a good interviewer. I found her interview technique good. A lot of these celebrity interviews are the celebrity genre that they're not necessarily very skilled interviewers, and they talk over or talk, and it doesn't go that well. But I thought Kate Thornton did it really well. She's obviously had a lot of practice after 200 episodes, hasn't she? But yeah, it was interesting. Again, it would only be of interest to me if I was interested in the person that she was interviewing on that occasion, but I would watch that one again. Number 15, this was one of my favourites of the whole thing. This was called Women Who Travel. These are sort of like little, they're about 30-35 minute episodes, and the one I listened to was it's not really an interview because it was more like, I suppose it is an interview. They cut out the questions though, so you just get the person talking, and it was a lady called Blair Braverman who survives life in the extreme cold and does dog sledging. There's a word for it and I can't think what the word is now because it's a while since I listened to it. She was absolutely fascinating, talking about her adventures. And then there was a sort of phone-in segment with a lady who regularly drives from one side of America to the other side, rehoming animals, which was again really interesting. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Again, this is one that I've subscribed to. I really enjoyed it. It was something different. I love anything travel related, and yeah, it really spoke to me, this one. Number 16 was the Declutter Hub. You see, I'm still trying to find a Decluttering Organization podcast, and this was all things Decluttering Organization. This was a UK one. It didn't grip me. I think that decluttering an organisation is just a visual thing for me. I think it works better with YouTube for me than just listening to it. So yeah, this one just didn't work for me. Again, it was fine. I listened to it, but it didn't spark me with enthusiasm, let's just say it like that. They do have YouTube as well, the women who run this Declutter Hub podcast, so perhaps I might look them up on YouTube. The next one, number 17, was Off Air with Jane and Faye. Now, anyone who's been with me for a while might remember that I used to recommend, as my favourite podcast, Postcards from Midlife, which was these two same ladies, and then they changed the name of that to Fortunately. I've no idea why, because I always liked Postcards from Midlife. I thought it was a good name. And then they finished that because they stopped working for the BBC, and they've got a new radio show now on Times Radio, I think it is, and they have a new podcast. I think I've said about it, it's called Off Air with Jane and Faye. It's Fee Glover and Jane, I can't remember her, Jane Garvey, I have got it written down. This is sort of presented as, they've got their TV show on the air and then they've got the podcast, and this is off the air and they're saying what they really think. I didn't love this one as much as I loved their old one. I thought it was, maybe it was just the episode I listened to. I would give it another go, but I missed the format of the original Postcards from Midlife. Number 18 was Practical Positivity with Sophie Cliff, who I follow on Instagram, and I've recently done one of her joy courses as well. She's a joyful coach. Isn't that a lovely thing to be? She does a weekly podcast. It's only 10 to 20 minutes an episode, and it's basically about squeezing more joy out of your life. What could be nicer? I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I'm following it and subscribed to it, and will be continuing to listen to those joyful weekly episodes. I think following Sophie Clare for not the podcast particularly, but I did the 3-month course before Christmas, and also following her on Instagram has really made me think more about positivity. And I'm looking at my watch because it's 10 to 5 and I'm meeting friends for a drink at the pub at 5:30, so I need to crack on. I've got 3 more to do. You're Booked is the next one I read, which is a literary podcast. It's about books, and let me just read out what I've got here because I don't remember much about this one. The podcast for literary nosy Parkers who would like the chance to snoop around their favourite authors' bookshelves. I'm Daisy Buchanan, your book inspector. Yes, I remember this. She interviews an author and they chat about books, what's coming out, what they've enjoyed recently, the particular author who she's interviewing, what they've written as well. Lots of book chats, lots of recommendations. I really enjoyed this. I was driving when I listened to this, and I re-listened to it when I got home to get the names of all the books they talked about because I really wanted to read some of them. So yes, I liked that one. That was another one I've subscribed to. Number 20 was my final attempt to listen to an organisation and decluttering podcast, and it's one called Systemize Your Life. This says it is time and task management systems for home and business. This was an American one. The lady who does it is called Chelsea Joe, and the episodes are 20 to 30 minutes. There's almost 300 episodes available, so another one to binge if you're into that sort of thing. I liked this one. I really enjoyed it. I listened to her weekly meal planning episode, which was a recent one, and I gelled with it. I thought she talked about things in a very accessible way. I would definitely be going back to this one to look at more of her, or listen to more of her episodes again. So finally I found a Decluttering and Organisation podcast. It was more systemizing than decluttering, but yeah, it was good. And number 21, which I heard about in a Facebook group. Somebody wrote a post in a Facebook group that I'm in called Mrs. Gloss, saying that I can't remember what it was, but she talked about having recently started a podcast, and someone else had asked her what the podcast was, and it's called Widowed AF, and it is about being widowed young. Start again, put my teeth back in. It's hosted by 2 young women, I would say in their 30s, Rosie and Lulu, who both lost their husbands in tragic circumstances, very young, and how they deal with being widowed. I've listened to the first 3 episodes. One was just an introduction, and the 2 subsequent episodes were each of their stories about being widowed. Trigger warning for those if you're going to listen to it. They are quite hard hitting, certainly episode 2, but yeah, really interesting insight. That they talk about having a dark sense of humour, which appeals to me. I too have a dark and dry sense of humour, and I'm sure you're not surprised by that. And I really enjoyed it. I found it very interesting. I found it well edited, and I'm listening. It's a very new podcast, so I'm sort of listening to that as the new episodes come up, but I would recommend that one as well. And that was the 21 podcasts I listened to in January 2022. I hope that you have found some to listen to there. Do let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for podcasts for me to listen to. I'm always up for trying new ones. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye.